There's a lot of conversations that happen now with AI, but I think the big question in the room is, like how much do you need to incorporate AI into your businesses? Do you need to start from scratch? If you're now looking at starting a venture, how do you now look at the landscape in such a fast-changing environment? So we actually have three amazing speakers I wanted to call on stage. Otto, who's the CEO of Photon Health. Vikas Sharma, he's the Director of Implementation at Anterior. He's stepping in for Ali today. And Bruno Ferrari, who's the Head of Innovation at Lighted. So I'd like to call him on stage. So wanted to start off by just a quick introduction about each of you. Otto, would you like to kick us off with just a bit about yourself, your company, where you guys are right now?
What's up? I'm Otto, co-founder and CEO of a company called Photon. We're in the lifestyle streetwear business. I've heard of you guys. We're in the business of helping patients navigate pharmacy. So today you receive a prescription, a digital thing kind of just goes over your head, and hopefully you go to the same pharmacy that your doctor punched into Epic. We try to make that like a consumer transaction so you can understand what your drugs cost, where to get them, where they're cheapest, where they're delivered from, etc. So think like patient access for pharmacy. Did I cover everything?
Yeah,
Cool.
covered it.
Hey everyone, my name is Vikas. I work at Anterior as the Director of Deployments. I spend most of my time finding out how we can actually take our AI products, our AI agents, and deploy them into health plans and health systems to actually achieve value there. Anterior is a AI company that delivers clinical solutions to health plans, and we mainly try to find ways to automate or accelerate existing health plan workflows.
All right, and I'm Bruno, although I also go by Bruce. I work at Lighted as Head of Innovation. I have a software engineering background, and Lighted is a strategy and product development company. We work across all stages with healthcare companies and help them develop their digital products. So,
Well, thank you, all of you. I wanted to start off by understanding where your companies are with respect to AI. Is it something that was part of the foundations when you started the company, or have been in the company with, or is it something that kind of came down the line later? Let's start with you, Vikas.
Yeah, sounds good. I think AI has always been pretty core to the offering that we've had at Anterior. When we initially started, we kind of broke into it with a prior authorization solution. We really try to go at it with a co-pilot angle. I think many people in the industry might say something similar, but around 2024, there was kind of an aha moment where a lot of different folks who maybe have specialized skills, maybe in legal or in healthcare, tried using ChatGPT or something for some sort of job they always did. We're like, oh, this is pretty good. It actually is some kind of reasoning. Maybe I can find a way to make this work. But in the initial days, it was just really bad. Like, it hallucinated a lot. The context was not great. And we found in the beginning, our Copilot product was a little bit brittle. We had to make a lot of abstractions to actually make this work. It kind of works sometimes. I do think now, at least, it's still at the core of the product, but we've loosened a lot of these abstractions. We've gotten more intelligent about it. We found ways to be a bit more creative about the implementation. How can we expand the use cases a bit more? Let's make it headless so it doesn't have to be a Copilot solution necessarily. But what we've also found is once you start actually deploying this into health plans, a lot of the actual difficulty or a lot of the value you can find is in maybe context management, change management. How do you actually build really effective infrastructure that can deploy this at speed, at scale? So still important, but I think a lot of things have been weighted a little bit differently.
Otto, would you like to go next?
We are a pre-AI company. We've been around for a minute, half a decade now. And we use AI today as much as anyone does to write code, just understand what's going on. Honestly, most of our AI deployment is to collect information from third parties whom we do not have a direct integration with via voice. So that's kind of a cool ability to figure out what's going on with the prescription. To be we can call a pharmacy with AI. We call hundreds of thousands a month when a patient wants to know what's going on with their prescription. So there's lots of cool kind of under the hood use cases for us. We also have internet at Photon. We're using phones. We have faxes as well. Lots of other technologies that
sounds very high tech.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of I have a strong opinion on AI right now because I feel like it's a value prop where people are kind of coloring it as a value prop. We're far enough into this thing that we're realizing that for most use cases, it's actually far too expensive to deploy like a website. So a lot of healthcare businesses are realizing that you can't just push AI into a user workflow and have it be, economically viable, especially for, non-clinical visit oriented stuff. AI in the workflow makes a ton of sense because you could possibly save clinical time. But yeah, I think we're all at this like reckoning moment where all the cool magical user experiences that we all built in the last 2 years are like not easy to scale from a cost perspective, and the underlying models all of a sudden, like I think everyone's looking at their bills from OpenAI in the last month being like, oh my god, holy shit, we're spending a lot of money. So yeah, we're kind of in that phase of AI, which I'm curious if you guys have hit that too.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the reason we wanted to have this conversation. A lot of companies that we personally come across, they're looking to just stay ahead of the competition, worried about what's coming next, and just trying to stay ahead of that curve. But at the same time, they're not really thinking through, how do you actually go through the implementation?
Yeah.
If you're implementing AI, like how are you looking at it? Are you looking at it from a feature perspective? Are you looking at it because your clients are asking about it? Or is it the results that you're actually using that implementation for? So just curious, a quick follow-up for you, Otto. Have you considered using AI for anything that you may or may not have tried?
I mean, we have I would say this is a total waste of time and money, but we have a really interesting OpenClaw instance within Photon. No, I'm not going to tell you the phone number or email attached to it. But it has a very keen sense of like what the business is trying to do. Mm-hmm. And we're just burning a big hole in the ground in terms of what it's doing in cost. But it's interesting because it like keeps tabs on what the business is trying to do. And if you ask it a question, sometimes it says something insane, but sometimes it has like a very deep understanding of what the team is trying to accomplish. And I just raised money, and there were a lot of investors asking a lot of the same questions. So I was like retraining it on all the questions. And after a couple rounds, I could have it answer investor questions with like deep unit economics, KPIs stuff accurately. So I don't know. What's the business model there? I don't know, but there's a lot of like kind of cool workflow stuff that we're deploying. I don't think we're going to be in the business of selling AI. To be direct, I think if you're going to buy AI, you might as well just go straight to the source. Just get an API key from OpenAI at this point. I think that's kind of my general take, and you see the biggest players in the space doing that because you can also use that API key to go build whatever you need. So we're starting to see that kind of collapse. I see some nodding heads. Do you run a health system?
No, but I'm in product.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so we're all like, okay, what's the valuable, scarce thing that's going to exist post AI? I think we're still going to need to move pill bottles across cities to get them to consumers. So we're trying to focus on like, what are the non-AI problems that we can solve? Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's like kind of a hot take.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Bruno, I had a question for you. So you've been supporting health companies in different stages, early, middle, late. What is one thing that a lot of these companies are getting wrong when they're thinking about AI implementation, specifically companies that might not be AI native?
Yeah, and I can relate a bit to what Otto was saying, that we hear a lot of misconceptions. And it's incredible, but even late stage companies, they will approach us and say, hey, I just want AI in my product because my competitors have AI and because, there's a lot of new AI native companies in the space. So we are worried that we might be losing, opportunities by doing this. So I just want you to integrate a chatbot into this. And, that's a horrible way of approaching it because you need to approach it from not just the tech standpoint, but also from like a product standpoint, also from a design standpoint, and make sure that you're actually solving a problem that your users have. So yeah, that's one of the things that I've been hearing a lot over the past few years. And there's a lot of AI fatigue, I think, right now in users. There have been viral graduation speeches over the last few weeks. So yeah, it's a bit hard.
Makes sense. Are there any other considerations that kind of go into that decision? Like, are there considerations that they only realize once these conversations start?
Yeah, 100%. So I think time to market is one of those. I think they expect us to, deliver in 1 week, 2 weeks, what before we were delivering in 3 months. And it's true. I mean, AI has helped us a lot to move faster. But it's a highly regulated industry. You can't just whip up like some AI and let it free there. So that's also one part that they don't really understand.
Gotcha. Because my question for you is, wanted to kind of walk over an example of a deployment that you've personally overseen at Anterior and kind of just help us understand what goes into that consideration.
Yeah, sounds good. So there's one client that we're working with where we've actually been scoping out a solution for how do you actually deploy AI agents that do prior authorization. When we talk to different customers, like oftentimes how it looks like is we show them a little bit of what the agents can do. Maybe it's clinical reasoning, maybe it's like intake, for example, and we try to understand what are the problems that you might have in your particular organization. And there was one organization that you're talking to where a lot of the problems they were having were twofold. One, a bit of staffing issues where they actually couldn't meet a lot of their turnaround times because they simply just don't have enough staff on file to actually do all the prior authorizations, which is not an uncommon problem. I think many of you have worked in prior authorization. You might have heard a similar sort of story. And the second part of it was they might have had a rules engine or different guidelines that were more like static or rules-esque, but they weren't actually doing their job effectively. They were still seeing prior authorizations slip through or have unnecessary escalations where they should have been simple approvals or simple rule approvals, but ended up actually taking a clinician's time to do this review, which then ends up contributing to this whole turnaround time issue. So often what our team does is we kind of just go in, we shadow the workflow, try to understand exactly what guidelines are you using, what does your system look like, how exactly would you work with AI, for example, if it was even deployed into your system. You can imagine that everyone has a little bit of a different process. You might have clinicians that want to review it in a particular manner, and they're not really sure of exactly what does AI output look like, how do you do this work? And I think the way that we spent our time there was first you actually take some of the guidelines, some of the documents that they might be working with, find a way to codify this into something that an agent can actually reason over. Make sure you can validate this with their clinicians, make sure that you feel like it's true and representative of the actual source that you're trying to review against. The second part of this is actually taking a lot of what we do here at Anterior, which is trying to figure out how you can do medical or clinical reasoning very effectively, apply it against these policies, and then show what a result looks like. I think the hard part becomes like, how do you actually show these results, or how do you get the confidence when you're ready to actually say like, let's move this into production, let's actually do something where we want to run this against like real prior authorizations. And I think the process that we've seen is like, first you can like really try to do it on synthetic data, but it's not really representative of some of the difficulties that you might see in production or like actual nuances that you might see. One way that we've often seen it go is you actually start to run this in like shadow mode against a lower sample of cases, for example. Like, what if you ran this against 5% or 10%, but it's not actually affecting real determinations? It's kind of on the background. The second part of this becomes how do you actually find a way to QA this? So can we bring our clinicians? Can you bring your clinicians? Can we review the output, figure out if this is good, if this is bad, where are the issues? How can we modify this to get it to that point? And what we've often found is like in this process of like understanding exactly how you do authorizations or like your specific clinical nuance, you can bake that in pretty effectively into an agent with effective context management to get to that accuracy outcome over a large enough sample. And I think once we're able to show that over a period of time against like 500, 1,000, 2,000 different cases, you're actually able to get that confidence to start slowly increasing the volume of authorizations you're using AI for. And with this organization, we ended up deploying it out to production, very effectively monitoring it, giving them a very clear visibility into the overall production insights here. And on top of that, providing our own set of QA services that we can actually maintain and monitor the production quality. And we've seen like broadly incredible benefits across this organization where they've saved like 70% of review time and are broadly seeing improvements there. That's like one example that we've seen, and we've started to see a little bit more that are coming along kind of like this.
Can I tell a funny story about AI? We have a like a biz ops woman on our team who has just been like doing all of our finance as a single person because of AI, and it's wild. She's just like building a little empire in the corner of Photon. Her name's Sunny, so shout out Sunny. But she's gotten very good at like building like KPI dashboards that look really nice. And I was like, man, this looks incredible. Like this is like you could see all of our customers, all the growth rates, like all these little buttons. She had built this whole like web page on top of all of our internal docs and KPIs. But I was also like, this just makes bad data look great. You know what I mean? Like it kind of like an ugly spreadsheet. It's kind of hard to look past like, okay, that number, not good. It made like data that could have been better about a couple customers look beautiful. And I was a little bit like, man, it's such a encapsulation of what's happening with AI right now. Is like you can make some beautiful, cool workflow, but like it's actually the data's kind of bad. So I don't know. There's something about that nuance about how you can like put a lot of lipstick on a pig with AI. That's definitely like kind of how we're feeling in this moment in time.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that. So you mentioned that Photon isn't currently using AI for any of its features. Well, like essentially like which areas or which tools have you found interesting at Photon? What's kind of like streamlined that process for the people that might be looking to implement stuff to streamline their processes, their workflows for something that's already existing?
We don't have features that anyone would know are AI. I think that's the right way to deploy it. Like it's anything that helps us provide consumer delight with AI by like fetching prices and like, great. But it's not like AI at the top level. There's no like chatbot at Photon. One thing that's been wild lately is we're getting a steady stream of people finding out about Photon, signing up on our website, and creating developer accounts. And I get on the phone with all these people as soon as they do this just to ask what's going on. Almost all of them are from Claude and ChatGPT. And I don't know what the hell is going on, but like those models have learned deeply like our value props and how we work. And I've been running like a bunch of queries automatically every month to just ask the same question to 12 different models. And we come up first, like in lots of different like clinical workflow questions, like how do you add prescribing to a clinical app, Photon. So it's actually very neat that like it's shortening our sales cycles. And we're not doing anything. We're just putting like blog posts on our website.
Yeah. Bruno, would you have anything to add to that for companies that are not looking to implement like massive features?
Yeah, so I think that we've seen kind of like the same thing. We've seen a lot of people coming to us from ChatGPT and Gemini. We also have one prospect one time that it felt like we were talking to Gemini. Everything that we said, he was taking back to Gemini, and then Gemini was answering, and his emails were like Gemini talking to us. So that was a crazy experience and something that happens a lot. There's a lot of also AI kind of like engine optimization. Like you were doing SEO before, you're doing something different now. So that's also something that you could look into. But I think like if you're looking to integrate AI, like you need to approach it again from like different viewpoints. I think it's easy to get blindsided and say, hey, I mean, the tech is there, so it's easy. My users will love anything like related to AI, and that's very, very bad, because if you have like a tool that you, like a provider has been using a tool for 4 years, and then you implement something with AI and the AI hallucinates, then, it's like a more of like an erosion of the trust that you have built with that user, and not just like a bug. I think AI native companies, they have like a benefit there in which they can have a lot of bugs, and, the users don't really care because they know it's something new. But then if you're like already live, you need to be very careful, not just AI, but any feature that you implement. So I think there's a lot of companies that treat AI as, something different, something that, it's not really to be treated as any other feature, but it's its own thing. So they need to like just worry about integrating it, and that's it. And that's, very negative, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. Because coming back to you, I think you mentioned earlier that for some of the clients that you've had the longest, you're slowly allowing them to use more and more of the software to actually streamline the workflows. Which part have you seen personally that you feel humans are so critical and can't be moved?
Yeah. I think it's really, I don't think it's really possible to remove like clinical judgment from the picture and humans from the picture. I think there's just a crazy amount of nuance that you see in a lot of different prior authorizations that you might look at, or different scenarios that you see where like it's very difficult to see if you can confidently come to a correct determination 100 out of 100 times or 95 out of 100 times, or even at that accuracy level. I think areas where I found it to be like particularly important has been especially care management. I think we've had two different ways in which we've deployed solutions. Some are a little bit more open-ended, and some are a little bit more like deterministic. You're really looking for high accuracy, making sure that you can guarantee almost like that every single piece of information is grounded in something that has come from like a source document. In some of the different tools that we provided to customers, we provided like examples where you can use it to just like summarize the documents and get information out. And areas where we found like it doesn't really make a gigantic difference in like whether or not you're gonna have like a headcount thing is really care management. Like there's just so much to go around as far as how many different patients you can provide this care to, the level that you can provide. Having more information only makes it a bit like more fun, I think, for the actual end user to do this job. So we found that to be like a very like both like heartwarming and sticky place where I think it's very difficult to like remove someone from the picture there. I actually might add to this. I might even say like I don't want it to, because I'm scared of a world where like there's a her type agent that's like giving me care. Like I don't really know if that's like in my personal desire side.
I was talking to the audience just before the panel. One of the questions that came up is a lot of people are now uncertain about the future role of engineers. So in a world that's constantly changing, where the use of AI is going up, I guess, like, would any of you have anything to say in terms of how would those roles be defined in a company? How should those definitions be kind of decided from the top down?
I mean, I think about this one a lot. I'll go fast. There's builders and sellers. We're still in that age. It's been that way for decades. You're either building something or you're selling something. And I feel like we've gotten very complicated with the way we describe all the different pieces of those things for two reasons. One, there's a lot of context and like prioritization problems because there's not that many engineers. So we have a product all of a sudden. And I can say this because I was a product guy. And then you have all these executives that spin up strategy and operations. Like startups generate all these different people that are like, they're not really building, they're not really selling. And I think we have the same thing on the sales side. There's just like all these other different roles that are not quite sales. You have go-to-market and biz ops and rev ops. And like, I feel like we're going to probably go just back to a world where you're either building something new or you're selling something. And I'm finding some peace in that world where it's just like a lot cleaner. I can do whatever I want, but I'm either going to sell something or build something.
Build for the problem, not for the feature, is what they say.
Yeah, I'm just confident that AI is going to reduce the meaning between those different roles in a way where you're either going to just focus on net new stuff or you're going to focus on scaling. And I feel like I think we're going to see titles go away in the tech stack broadly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think this has had a direct impact on what we do. It's mostly software engineering. So at first, I think we were very worried about being like our clients, replacing us with AI or something like that. And I think it's been clear that the human part of, the problems won't go anywhere. And, it's kind of the same. And then it's been clear as well that the engineers need to be like a bit more complete. It's not just software, it's more like product engineer. So they need to be able to like understand what they are building. And it's more like management. It's like, they can whip up 5 agents and then they need to manage the agents and then they need to decide whether the output is good or not. So I think that's more of like a kind of like the role evolving. I think also you can do more, I think, with a smaller team, which is good mostly for early stage companies. Mm-hmm. But that just, gives you the opportunity to develop more features or to, worry about other parts of the company. And, I think it's a good thing.
Gotcha. You actually take me to my next point. If companies are thinking about kind of changing up the features, does it make sense to build internally or to actually build externally? What are kind of like the pros and cons?
So I think historically, not just in the AI era, you have always had 2 different options. You could hire someone like us, where we have, not just engineers, but also product managers, designers, QAs, DevOps engineers, AI specialists, and depending on your company and the focus that tech has for you, we might be like your tech department, or we might join your tech department, or you have the other path, which is building an internal team, which for AI you might hire like some AI engineers, but I think it's wrong to think that hiring a couple of AI engineers will solve all of your problems, because you need to like have someone on the product side caring about the problem and caring about the possible solutions. You need to have someone on the design side talking to users, having user interviews, doing focus groups, and then you have the tech. So it's more of like a complete thing.
I think about this a lot in terms of like the number of discrete problems a company wants to solve, and that you basically have to have a human being running each of those problems because. And I've used AI a lot. I don't know where I fall on the, AI native curve, but probably pretty high. I stay up late. I still think we're in an era where like AI doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have a value function for understanding what is right for a business or for a customer. So yeah, I think we still, and we have always worked this way, where like every single problem has a discrete owner and a clear like value function for how that person succeeds. Now you can just give more to each individual person and you don't have to have such discrete problems. The idea of having no humans at any company, and I said some words on the internet about this whole MedV thing that happened where like one person sort of builds a company on their own. I just don't see that as actually an interesting way to run a business. I think you could do much more interesting problem solving if you put a human on a single problem and say, here, you get rewarded if you solve this problem. It's just way more interesting. And then that person can go deploy whatever code is agents, internet is required to solve that. And I think that's how organizations are working.
I can only talk from the lens that like Anterior works in, and broadly we try to serve these health plans. I think there was an era where like 2024, it's pretty garbage. Everyone sells like AI is going to change your life. AI is going to be like this magical thing. All these health plans buy it. It's garbage. Like it doesn't work. They implement it. It doesn't like, it wasn't quite there. People didn't really know the models for deploying it. And the health plan goes inside and like their tech leader says like, why are we doing this? Like I could have given you the same thing, which is pretty objectively true. And then they spend about a year going through this motion of trying to build it themselves. And they find out that like, well, technology is like 1/3 of the problem. There's like an entire third of the problem that is just like change management. There's an entire third of the problem that is like, how do I organize my data in a way that I can even do anything with it? And to your point of like lipstick on the pig, it's like a year of lipstick on the pig, basically. And I think 1 year later, companies are kind of thinking to themselves now, and like we hear this a lot with like health plans we talk to. Like, I actually would like to have a partner who I can talk about AI transformation with. Like, I recognize there's change happening in different industries. I don't think it's impossible in my industry. Is there a partner who can help me do all three of these things? And I think one thing, it's like not surprising that model companies have spun up like OpenAI deployments or Anthropic deployments. Like, if it was just a model, you wouldn't really have to do that. If you could just like ask an API or something for infinite intelligence, you probably could like solve the problem already. And I think what we're finding now is like, for some organizations where like you really know what the problem is, you have really clean data, you have like a good change management process, like you should take a stab at implementing it yourself, see how it goes. I think oftentimes what we see with organizations is like when you have like really complex business goals of like, we need to reduce this by this because we can't hire this many people, or we want to scale our business in certain ways. Anterior often comes in or a little bit as like a thought partner to help you out. We can do change management with you and then deploy the technology as well. And I think more and more companies are going to lean more into the like, let's bring in a vendor who can help us with all three of these fronts. It's not really about one. We just need like a thought partner for transformation broadly.
Yeah. I mean, we run a slightly maybe different model. Every single line of code at Photon has been written by a full-time engineer who is a part owner in the company, with the exception of code that we're now writing with AI. But same, like that's also still like there's a human who cares about the outcome, not the output of that code in everything we do. And I think like that is critical for a startup to operate that way, in my view, because if someone doesn't own something, they're just going to like slap it together. The same way your agent that you deployed to build a website for you is just going to slap it together. Having a human being with like judgment and taste, I guess the taste thing has gotten kind of overworked lately, but like some mental heuristic of what is valuable needs to own a problem. And the company necessarily should not try to solve more problems than are needed to prove a hypothesis true or false. And it's neat to see that scale over time, because we just raised a bunch of money and now I'm like, cool, we could just have like more humans, more problems, but they have to all make sense collectively. And I think that's in the age of AI, it's much more interesting, but I still think outsourcing a critical problem for a business is not the right way to do things for a business that's trying to like develop core competencies. So, I mean, not every business needs to be core competency at building software. So we're going to always need folks to do that, especially for healthcare delivery businesses. But
yeah, I guess you're essentially touching on like the business needs first, identify the needs of what they need, kind of work from there. There was always different ways to get in there with different people, different solutions. Just trying to figure out what's best for the company.
yeah.
Awesome. The next question I had open to all of you is there anything that you've seen with AI that, you know, your perspective kind of changed over the past 1.5 years? Is there anything that you thought was true is not anymore?
I think the one for me is, I really thought that when we found a way to make this work, a lot of companies would kind of just like bolt it on into their existing system and try to optimize like a percentage of their business. Like I definitely imagine for health plans, like, okay, cool, you can make like maybe this part more efficient, or like you can automate this, like let's kind of like try to bolt it onto our existing systems in some way. I have found that once a health plan executive or someone in the organization actually sees what is possible, they like do think about like 100 different ways in how you can actually improve the business, or how you can re-architect processes that exist today to make them more effective. Like these organizations are actually full of individuals who are like both very creative and ambitious in some capacity and want to find a way to how you can expand this and make workflows better. And I've been like very pleasantly surprised with, I think, the different ways and like models in which teams can organize around like us being able to actually deliver this intelligence more effectively. Like I don't think I was expecting that.
How many software developers do we have in the room? I'm trying to get a little audience engagement. So I used to be a software engineer. Now I run a company, so I'm a sales guy. But I think probably half this room, so software engineer wise, had this like almost religious epiphany over Christmas break, where we were like vibe coding whatever we were vibe coding. We're like, oh my god, this thing can do the whole thing now. And I think like I've sort of watched different people on our team have that with each of their like retrospective operational functions, like writing code, doing spreadsheets, strategy. Like strategy has become like remarkably declarative at Photon, where I'm just like, here's all the stuff. How do we think through this? And like, bang, here's a spreadsheet. That I think if you haven't experienced that sort of like AI, oh my God, my job is totally different thing yet, like in the last 6 months, you should go home and download, blood code or whatever. But I feel like that now has created this different era of like, how do we actually work differently? And now we're also all of a sudden in this place where, holy shit, they're going to rug pull us and just make this really expensive. So anyway, hot takes.
So for me, I think 18 months ago, we were just starting out 2025. And I think at that time we were getting like AI agents being a bit more mainstream. So I think I was a bit more naive and optimistic. And I said, oh, maybe with all of this free time, we'll get some, time to fix like the core problems of the industry, like the fragmentation, and everything else. And then, 18 months later, we've seen, I think, none to little of that. I think we have a lot of shiny AI features out there, but, the same problems that we had before. And I think, it's a highly regulated industry. So I think regulations need to move first, and regulations move very, very slowly. I think that was one of the things. And we still have faxes. Otto still has faxes.
We're not helping. We've also noticed this phenomenon where like all the problems we didn't fully solve in 2010s still exist, to the like lipstick on the pig. So when we're trying to figure out how to make clinical decision support work, we're building on top of like some really murky, swampy, interopy soup. I don't know if that visual works for everybody, but I feel like we're still actually, that's the lipstick on the pig thing I'm talking about. But I'm pretty confident that the network integration problem is going to, like the barrier to entry to building a new network or to making interoperability work better is going down because of AI, but we're still not there from an incentives perspective. So like the core existential problems that are rooted in healthcare, and I spend a lot of time shaking my fist at PBMs who prevent patient access to pricing. Doesn't matter how much AI or fancy crafty code or smart people I throw at that problem. It's like a structural incentive. We think we're gonna get it, but it's not just code.
Makes sense. Quick follow-up on that. So one of the other things that we've commonly been asked with our audiences, when they're looking to deploy different, features, they're always trying to understand how to navigate the return on investments versus the cost of some of these deployments as well. So would you have any advice for any founders in the room that are navigating that?
Don't sell an AI product right now. If you're selling AI to someone, you're cooked, because I think we're already past the model. We're past the point where big or small companies got away with like building AI stuff for the sake of it. And every single company is now quantifying build the same, like we did 2 years ago, where, right, what's the ROI? Show me some data that this works at a different health system. Like it's not, I think the free pass that everyone got to skip the line and just do the cool AI thing now, that's super, super over. So for the founders in the room, don't sell AI. You're late. Sell something different. And I think there's a lot of other really interesting problems. Like go solve the thing that the AI needs to do its job better. Like I'm much more obsessed about like networks and data sources than that. But I think ROI it's way more fun to sell a product that has real ROI. And if you either do or you don't, it's kind of like easily quantifiable. And if it's not easily quantifiable with your current customers, like go spend time with those customers and do more things before you start trying to like build ROI models up market, which is easy for me to say on stage. It takes years, but yeah.
Yeah. What I would add to that, I think, is that you need to be very mindful in that it's kind of subsidized right now, like the AI industry. So, tokens are already very, very expensive. Like if you don't do like a cost analysis on the feature that you're about to implement, you might get like a very, very big surprise in terms of like a bill. So you need to analyze very, very well, like how much usage that feature is gonna get, which model you are gonna use, and then, try to do numbers from there. I think on our side as well, it's been, quite the roller coaster because we use a lot of tokens and tokens are expensive. So if you have like an internal team, you need to be mindful of that as well. I think there's a lot of TikToks around that, it's now, I think, cheaper to hire someone like a software engineer again than to use AI for the full cycle.
Yeah, I might provide a bit of a contrarian take to Otto on this one. I think you can sell AI. I think you can show ROI, and I think we've done it. And there's like public case studies that prove that it's very doable. I don't think it's easy. Like, I just don't think that AI solves your problems magically. Like, it's not like that. So much of the problem are like deep infrastructure problems or like model routing problems or like context management problems. Like, you don't solve the problem by throwing tokens at it. You solve the problem by like intelligently managing everything around it. And there's a lot of room in the space to still do so and still deploy that and still sell it. But to the point, it's like you have to solve a real customer problem. There has to be real ROI there. You have to prove that you can solve it. You have to prove that you can save this person money. I think at Anterior, we're like, I wouldn't say we're the perfectly disciplined financial organization, I think, in terms of token spend. But I would say like our goal has often been like, can you solve the problem first? If you can solve it very well, can you become creative on how you actually manage your cost and bring that down to an acceptable level? I do think we're in an era where you have subsidized tokens. I don't think it's going to last forever. So I'd actually say like now is probably your time. Don't wait 1 year and then try to use like 10x cost tokens to go do it. That's my take.
Just before we head to Q&A, is there anything that you're most excited for with, different use cases of AI in healthcare? Anywhere that you think there is a potential use case that can be built for?
We take a stab at Lighted at, try to craft products as part of our work in research and development. We try to craft different products and then see if maybe they get traction. We created one 2 years ago. It's called Compliant ChatGPT. It's a HIPAA compliant AI assistant. And I think it's amazing. Like, we have 750 paying customers now, and it's amazing to see how much the lives of the providers can change with a tool like that. Some say that they spend like 4 hours a day just with notes and admin work, and that we've been able to reduce that by, like 80% or something crazy. So I think there's a lot of improvement in, admin work, boring stuff. I think the boring stuff is where probably there's a lot of improvement in. And also, I think that way providers can get some more quality face-to-face time with like their patients, which is a good thing.
I think there's one that's been really interesting to me recently, which is like, how can you be more proactive about surfacing information upstream in back office health plan things? So the example I'll give here is like HEDIS, right? Like, there's this HEDIS season at the end of the year where everyone kind of sits down and they go through all the different clinicals and they say like, oh, like, did your patients meet X qualification? Did they meet Y qualification? And it's like, you actually have like nurses who are spending their time going through like hundreds and thousands of these. You could probably do it proactive. Like, if you actually are able to identify all this information up front when you're actually doing the authorization or looking at the clinical record in the beginning, you could save so much of this downstream, which like in theory translates downstream to better care, or like telling your provider, for example, you didn't actually do like your A1C checkup and you actually need to go do this for your patients. Like, I am very optimistic that there are use cases that we can extract information higher up in the workflow in the back office that downstream translate to better provider care. The path is long, but I think there's somewhere to get there.
I mean, one thing that we're seeing in our business that's really cool, and it's kind of the benefit of just like trying to solve like the lowest level problem in a stack, which is like physically getting a patient medicine. That's what we're trying to do. Not just the data stuff, but like make sure that they actually get treatment on an ongoing basis. That problem's not going to go out of style unless drugs go away, and drugs are not going away. But what's cool is like, I think clinicians are going to work completely differently. And I am very convinced that the vast majority of prescribing goes away entirely in the next, whenever it comes to mind, I'm going to double it, 10 years. And we're in this like self-driving car era of clinical care. where we don't even have a solid car right now. Like Tesla started with cars that had super like good. We figured out brakes, we figured out cameras. Healthcare doesn't quite have some of those like core components, but I think we are definitely in this like self-driving car mode where clinicians want to be like sort of on the bleeding edge all of a sudden. So like that's the most exciting aspect. And I guess I'll try to tie this more neatly. It's going to create like a builder mode again for individual clinicians to go build and hack and do cool stuff, where it's like FSD mode and they're the ones in charge of the agents. And like today, the people that run the software in healthcare are like big companies. The big companies run everything. And it would be very cool to live in a world where like a bunch of little people like go deploy software and workflows and change things. And I think enabling the end user, the same way Tesla focused on, you know, drivers and like driver comfort and product, like it's a very cool analogy for me that I'm pretty fired up about. If you follow the analogy to extent though, at the end of that story, Tesla owns all the Teslas and they're driving around without use, and then no one buys the cars anymore. So I don't even know how it works like when we really get to full self-driving in prescribing. But I do think like for the vast majority of like day-to-day care, you can get your statins renewed automatically. Like that should just happen. If we can get a car to move around on the street, like we should be there. So anyway, sorry, that's my little soapbox. But
Awesome. With that, we're gonna open it up to Q&A. Does anyone have any questions?
hit us with the heavy stuff.
My name is Katya Solovyeva. I'm based in Philadelphia. There's a little bit of a setup that I'm going to do and then the question. So I work in biopharma commercialization. And my hot take for today is that a lot of the times the solutions are there, the sophistication is there, and even the ROI, actually, when we talk about value-based healthcare and health economics, it is very, very possible with the models that we have and the statistical tools that we have to demonstrate far-reaching ROI, and like all sorts of spillover effects and whatnot. But the problem that I see is the wrong pocket problem, where you have the ROI, but you're asking the wrong entity to pay for the ROI, and the ROI is more distributed. And in the context of healthcare, this would be something like, if I'm an insurer, you're pitching me a solution, but if my entire patient panel turns over entirely in 5 years, I'm pretty much subsidizing the next insurer's cost savings. So is there anything that you're seeing that you're excited by, not on the tech side of the equation, but maybe around contracting or like any creative solutions around how innovations are financed?
I hate to tell you this, but like healthcare is still not changing. Like we still have this problem where the hierarchy of the things that get worked on are related to who has margin. And pharma companies have margin. So I imagine like if pharma companies want something to happen because they have margin, it's actually very easy. And they're extremely commercial. Like we happily work with a couple of different pharma companies. Very clear how to make stuff happen. Health systems don't have margin. So payers have fixed margin, if you think about it. Like a payer is always going to make 15% profit, and anything else they spend like messes with that. So I feel like because we work in an industry where like there isn't extra margin to go like try stuff, means like the places we can try stuff are usually like on the pharma side. So that's one thing that I think it creates a lot of workflows in healthcare, and we're one of them, where like you subsidize the value to the core user as a way of creating value for someone else. It's like classic agent actor problem. I don't think we're going to get out of the agent actor problem unless we move to like a full cash pay system or some cash oriented workflow. So like, you know, as everyone, or maybe till we go full single payer. But I feel like because we live in this world, I'm more toward full cash, if anyone's wondering. But like the advantage of a true marketplace is that if I'm the one paying, I'm also the one that benefits. And I think that is not going to go away right now. So I'm not going to say any more on that, but curious if any other hot takes on this.
No, I wish I had a great take for you on this. I actually just don't.
Yeah, no, me neither. So
I've often thought you should have to pay to be healthy. So if we're going there, there's lots of different like economic models that would make more sense for healthcare. We pay to be sick right now. Everyone talks about sick care, but like, what if you got taxed on being healthy? Which is sounds like somewhat absurd idea, but I feel like It'd be interesting model for, I think there's private means for companies to go do this kind of thing experimentally, but like I would start paying Lilly money right now just to have any drug they produce later. Like I would just subscribe to Lilly as a Lilly member. Right. I'm from Indianapolis, so I might be a Lilly super fan, but like, do you see what I'm trying to say here? Is like there's different economic models that some of these companies that have lots of margin could go try, in terms of like how economic care should work. But sometimes when I've, really step away from work, I think about like different economic models, but the government's involved here, so don't expect it to change too quickly.
I have maybe an engineering question that's easier to answer. I'm curious, we talked about cost a little bit, and I'm curious if you have takes around like edge compute and open source models as they kind of continue to catch up.
Yeah.
Especially around this, like we also talked about ownership, both for the engineers, but also for like a patient who maybe doesn't want Anthropic to own all their health information, right? Takes, please.
Yeah, I do have some on those. We've tested a lot of different open source models and a lot of different things. I think, you can be HIPAA compliant with Claude. You can be HIPAA compliant with OpenAI. You need to sign a BAA and you need to use the zero data retention APIs. I think if you're hosting the model, then you need to worry about processing power. I think if you want a model that's good enough, that competes with, the Claude models and the OpenAI models, then you need like a very, very big model in terms of amount of parameters. So that's very expensive to deploy as well. Also, then you need to worry about your own kind of like guardrails on the model. There's a lot of things that, if you are, maybe there are some use cases for like smaller apps, like maybe personal care apps that you can download like an app on your phone and doesn't need to be like super smart. But then if you're working in software engineering, I think it's a bit more complex than that because you need the model to be very, very good and to execute very highly complex tasks. So I think it depends a bit on the use case, but it's generally a very expensive route, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of who we serve are often like health plans or delegated UM firms, and we haven't quite yet seen the problem of these entities wanting like, please don't give all my information up to Anthropic. I think the primary question is like accuracy, quite frankly, and like, can it do this thing really well? I have only seen it to do this thing really well in a very certain amount of use cases. I think on our side, from an engineering perspective, we're always trying to find ways where you can reduce your costs on this particular job and still maintain the same accuracy on your evals. I think open source models are becoming an area where you can do so. I know areas we've explored initially are like taking some of these open source models and seeing if you can fine tune it to get to that same level of performance, but it's a bit of a work in progress. Like it's something I think will come along, but not much that I have on this.
On a recent vision quest, I was thinking about how we like haven't had a PC moment with AI yet. Not that there necessarily will be one, because that's not how technology works. But like if you look back to the 80s, we had like mainframes where if you wanted IT stuff, you had to buy like a whole computer room, and there was like a space constraint and a compute constraint related to physical locations. The same thing is true in a data center today, primarily because the architecture of GPUs wasn't really designed for AI, and it takes like years to get hardware right. I think we are a few years away for like utility AI use cases being good enough to run on a phone, and a lot of this is like just hardware lag. And I do think that is going to completely change the paradigm. And it's going to actually be very hard for Anthropic to own that. So I would recommend shorting their IPO. Hold though. Yeah. No, I'm allowed to give investment advice. This is investment. No, I'm kidding. Not investment advice. But yeah, in general, I'm like very excited for this concept where models that are good enough that have a little more time to run because they're like, you're not waiting on a prompt. It's running in your pocket. I think that's going to happen, and it's going to completely change the face of things. And if you'll notice, like there's a trend for me, like I want to live in the world where one or two companies don't run the world. Like that's like the worst case for everybody. So maybe it's like cope or like general like infectious optimism, but I do think that the answer to that question will be the difference between whether or not our lives are, like controlled by two companies or not in the next 6 years.
Hi there. My name is Rohit. I'm a physician myself and a founder. And my question for you guys is, in your conversations with VC while raising, have you found any appetite for products that are direct to clinician? You guys represent pharma, health systems, and insurance. But to your point about clinicians who have a real appetite to transform their workflows, is there any appetite on VC to help fund those solutions?
So on our end, we have a couple of customers in the space, and I say that they have interest from VCs to invest in them. So I would say yes. Also, I think on our own to comply, and we are not looking for investment, but everyone that I pitched that yesterday, they told me that it was great and that boring work was kind of like where the future was headed, and they were willing to invest if we wanted to. So I think there is interest in something like that. I have seen it.
Do we have any VCs in the audience? Any venture capitalists? Cool. So if there were a lot, I was still going to say this, but venture capitalists have no idea. But that's not the point. I think in some ways, like, they're structurally designed to sort of take a asymmetric bet on something occurring. And there's been a couple more recently, but like Doximity, for example, built an empire on being like clinician obsessed. There are some nuances to like what the era they grew up in. But like seeing companies like Open Evidence come in and also win in this regard is really cool. However, those companies are very much struggling to like get stickiness, the new ones. So that workflow of the future thing feels more up for grabs than ever. And so if you can short Epic stock, you can't. It's private. But yeah, I want to live in a world too where like clinicians get to like build their own workflows or like run their practices from their phones. Like we've been talking about this forever. Like back, I was talking to an advisor of ours. He was talking about like how in the 80s they were excited about the Mac and like what it would mean for doctors. I was like, man, if you could just see 2026, you'd be so sad. Like these computers fucked us. So yeah, as someone who has like a bleeding heart product-led growth tendency, I'm highly convinced that it is possible, but it's extremely hard to make the unit economics work because you doctors are so cheap. No, I'm kidding. Like you can't charge a doctor for workflow because they're not used to buying software. So I think that's a truly difficult thing to broker. It basically means you can only go with this like freemium ad supported model. Which historically is extremely hard to pull off. And like doctors hate that too. So I think the only way in is like a weird sort of data angle and like look at what Open Evidence and folks are doing. So I'm curious what the VC in the room thinks.
I think it depends on what you're building and what you're interested in solving for. Most of the companies I invest in have some type of reimbursement. So if you have something that can be reimbursed, then I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think there's interest.
Yeah.
I do have an observation. You guys have talked a lot about like LLMs and workflow optimization, but are any of you guys collating your own data sets to build your own proprietary AI? You guys haven't talked about anything like that.
That sounds expensive. Yeah. We're going to need more venture
It sounds like a moat.
capital. We're going to need more venture capital.
I don't believe in the power law. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. I'm going to find you later.
I actually think about it a little bit more of like, can you build specialized AI for the enterprises that you're deploying to? And the reason I say it this way is if you're a health plan X or health plan Y, you're doing your prior authorization a specific way. You're doing your HEDIS a specific way. There's all this like institutional grade context that you have or data that you have that you often want to apply to your specific organization. What we can be really good at is actually taking a fairly generalized agent capability, deploying it into your organization, and using your data in your context to build you something that's effectively best in class. There are other creative ways that you can take some of the learnings from that and use it to build like your own loops. Like one example is like when you see like an agent fail, for example, in production, you can actually quickly see like why did this occur? Like what is the trace of like in what each individual steps did it fail at? And then you can learn over that. And that is like in its own way a weird like type of proprietary data set. But I think in healthcare it's a little bit different too. Like different enterprises are a lot more sensitive about their data than I think you might see in other industries, where it's like traditionally a lot easier to build some sort of like data moat, or like we can just get access to this information and train on it or something of the sort like that. I think generally you build a lot more trust in healthcare when you let it stay within the balance of the organization as much as possible and deliver a better experience for them. Some nuances there, but it's kind of how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, what I would add to that is that in order to create like your own LLM, I think that's a no-go, because you need like a huge amount of data, just because of what an LLM is, which is essentially like a text-based.
I'm thinking outside of LLMs, like different deep learning models, things that are your own proprietary product, then that you build this moat around because you have the data set and nobody else has the data set. LLMs, they've been done. I hear you on that. And
We've been working on something really cool here that like isn't quite public yet, so no one talk about this. It's a secret. We've figured out how to hello, radio test. We figured out how to like healthcare data in aggregate is interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff. That's actually kind of a solved problem, especially like, we got Datavant around. They're a couple blocks away. Datavant kind of like crushed the aggregated data de-identification sale to pharma company thing. So I think what's more interesting is having like patient-specific data that's real time and can be ingested by clinical models. Like right now, everybody, and I'm talking everyone from Abridge to Open Evidence to Doximity to Ambience, like Scribes, or like even small companies are all trying to build a context-aware like clinical decision engine. We're pretty good at reference when we just look at like corpus of public data. But actually doing this on an individual patient basis is like maddeningly difficult because of this like data completeness problem. You don't know if I have all the data I'm supposed to have. So this matters a lot in pharmacy, because if we're going to get to self-prescribing cars, then you need to know about completeness, but you also need to then go fetch patient-specific data related to the clinical decision support. So the way I'm thinking about this problem right now is, there's this like ping pong between the context where you're fetching more data based on clinical decisions. And one thing we're working on that I'm excited about, and if anyone wants to work on this, we're hiring. Imagine a LLM of some type or some agent of some type collecting information either via voice or via text. You can feed that information into a model and then go start to input like a clinical action and say, oh, we want to suggest a prescription here to the clinician. You can now start to get to a world where we detect intent and suggest treatment to doctors in real time while they're in a visit, and even do things like, okay, we know a prior auth is going to be required for this, start to inject those questions into the context so the doctor doesn't have to go back and forth. That's just an example related to prescriptions, but I feel like everyone in the industry is sort of tackling that same problem for every different component, which is like, how do we get the patient-specific next step data in that LLM for that next question just in time? Anyway, I'm curious if that resonates with other people who are kind of building some kind of agentic workflows. The aggregation of huge data is still interesting and valuable, but it feels like the patient-specific stuff is where the alpha is right now.
I got a question about since you guys are engineers, how do you approach finding the right partner to co-develop? I feel like it's very needed, especially in healthcare settings. Finding the right partner to co-develop together to solve a problem deeply. How do you assess as founder or like as engineers if that the other partner is a good partner or not? Thank you.
That's a very good question. I think it all comes down to that person does not only need to understand the tech, but needs to understand and be kind of like in love with the problem and why you're solving that problem. And I think, you need to be also able to focus on other parts of the business as well. So you need to be able to do product, you need to be able to do design, you need to be able to understand the compliance and regulatory scenario as well. So I think there's a lot of that in finding the right partner, someone that cares about your company as much as you care about it. And I think that's probably the key to it.
I have a quick perspective on this. We have a couple like really meaningful development partnerships. And I was joking the other day, like there's a chief pharmacy officer at a health system that we work super closely with. And I was like, honestly, I would ask this guy to be like my child's godfather or whatever. So like, I think there's a little bit of just like true relationship element is the answer to that question. Like deep trust between people that like, you know, I'm not going to sleep until I've solved a problem for this guy. Like, and I think like showing him that I have that level of trust and vice versa. Simultaneously, I think that's what it takes at the enterprise level to go earn the right to go solve some of these problems. You also have to show that you've solved a large portion of like, or have the components to go do that. So there's a very serious chicken and egg problem where like, why would a multi-billion dollar health system or multi-billion dollar payer trust an entrepreneur to solve a problem? Generally, it's because nothing's on the shelf, or because like the tech that exists today is like highly influenced by parties that they don't want to work with. So I feel like finding like not just a problem with ROI, but like a vision that is aligned with yours in a partner is like a very special thing. And when you do that, you create huge companies. And I think there's a lot of examples recently of companies that did that. Like go look at the story with the bridge, go look at the story with like, you know, a whole bunch of these companies that like had one or two early anchor partners that like are the reason their product got so good.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question, but go find that person.
With that, we're going to end Q&A. Can we give a big round of applause to the panelists?
Thanks for